Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head back to the motherland of Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, quite a few different styles, but I think it is most definitely fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, and they've made a very good name for themselves with that particular style category. Indeed, they were the first craft brewery in Scotland really to focus on this particular style. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases here in Hong Kong. It's a style that I've had from them many times before, one that I know they can do very, very well, and this is one of two that I bought at my local bottle shop here. I couldn't resist when I saw there was an Overtone release, and that's just how it goes. But yeah, heard very good things about this one, so very curious to see how it turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are returning to my motherland of Scotland. We're going to go to Glasgow in the west, and to be specific, we are going to go to an area called Yoker, and that means we're having a look at another beer from the wonderful Overtone Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Utopia. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this is another New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this is one of two that I picked up from Gur Beer in the One Mall in Tsim Sha Tsui here in Hong Kong. They had about 5 or 6 Overtone beers, if memory serves me correctly, and a few different styles, but this was one of 2 double IPAs that they had actually. So yeah, I got this one, and what was it, Broken Clouds, if I remember correctly, or Marble Skies, that was it, Marble Skies actually. Broken Clouds was a big triple IPA that I had in Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, this one, New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, a style we know very well from this brewery, and yeah, I just couldn't resist getting this one. Quite an interesting hop bill in it as well, which we'll come to a little bit later on. But yeah, let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done involving Overtone Brewing Company, and there will no doubt be more added to that in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist, along with a number of other things. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity these days. And do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days. But anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a wee bit about Overtone Brewing quickly again. So, Overtone Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Glasgow, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Bo Wei Wang, who is originally from Beijing in China. So he'd been a home brewer for a number of years before he founded the brewery, and the name that he chose for his brewing project was Overtone, after his love of techno music, and that's the main reason why pretty much all of the Overtone Brewing Company beers have these kind of sort of roundel type designs, if you like. It's kind of reminds me of the old Windows Media Player actually, and how you used to get all these things, but I think it is supposed to be like, you know, the kind of shapes and stuff you'll see at a rave. But yeah, in the early days, Bo Wei hired Dan Miller, who's from New Hampshire in New England in the northeastern US, to come in as his head brewer, and he'd previously worked as a head chef, but also as a brewer in England, New York, and in Scotland as well, for 6 Degrees North, who do some very nice Belgian style beers incidentally, so check those guys out too. But also involved at the brewery is Martin Conahan, who had worked in the craft beer scene in New Zealand for a number of years. He takes part in the brewing, but does a lot of other things as well, and these days they also have Charlie Irving, who's involved in the brewing, and he comes from a background of home brewing, but previously worked for another local brewery in Glasgow as well, because there is quite a big beer scene in Glasgow these days, which is great to see. But the brewery itself can be found in the New Albion Industrial Estate in Yoker, near Renfrew and Clydebank, where my grandparents were from, and they began their operations there back in 2018. But the brewery don't have a fixed range as such, and they're always brewing different beers, but they are the first brewery in Scotland to have focused on the New England Hazy IPA. I mean, Tempest Brewing were doing lots of IPAs and things like that before, a mix of hazies and West Coast and things like that, but yeah, Overtone were the first ones who really kind of adopted this style as their main focus, if you like, and that's got them a lot of plaudits. Actually, their beers became very, very popular when they went down to England, but they'd been around for a couple of years in Scotland before that and were very well regarded. But that's really where the hype train kicked off with these guys, is when they went down to England. But over the years they've continued to develop the brewery's infrastructure. They've also got a tap room in Beijing these days in the Dongcheng area of the city, which is kind of to the northwest of the very central part, if I'm not mistaken. I'll need to go and check that out when I visit Beijing later in the year. But as of May 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced just over 210 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. Like I said, the vast majority of those are West Coast IPAs, but these guys do a number of, they've been doing a number of fruity sours in recent times. They've also done a number of imperial stouts, a few regular stouts as well, and there's been a few West Coast IPAs over the years too, a few lagers in recent times too. So yeah, Overtone do other styles, but yeah, the main focus is these New England hazy IPAs. I'd love to try a Scotch ale from them at some stage, and also a black IPA. Those are two styles I feel that are missing a little bit from what I've tried from them so far. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Overtone Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So like I said to you earlier, this is one that was bought at Ger Beer in the One Mall in Chimsha here in Hong Kong. I forget how much I paid for this one, but I'll put the Facebook page and the Instagram down there for Ger Beer, and you can keep an eye on those guys if you're watching from Hong Kong. There you can see Overtone Brewing Company. They've just changed it to Overtone now. It always used to say Overtone Brewing Company, but now just Overtone Utopia, plain silver top on the can there, and it always tells you a little bit about the beer on the back. This is a 440 milliliter can, incidentally. But yeah, the hops in this one are El Dorado, and that's in pellet format cryo, and there's some Citra and Mosaic in this one as well. So these are all American hops, we know them fairly well. El Dorado is quite an interesting one because it gives you quite a lot of passion fruit and also a good wee bit of pineapple from what I remember, about 12% alpha acid if I'm not mistaken. Was a hop that's been around for a wee while but never gained the same popularity as, say, Simcoe from memory. But Citra and Mosaic are ones we know quite well, both 14% alpha acid. In a New England IPA, Citra's going to give you big, ripe, juicy mangoes, maybe a little bit of peach as well, and then it's also going to give you some of that lemon-limey character. But Mosaic is all about the kind of more oily tangerine, but it's got quite a wee bit of distinctive earthiness to it as well. But yeah, interesting hop combination in this one. I think it will have a good balance between being quite tropical and a little bit citrusy, of course, too. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and just see what it's all about. The Utopia, 8% double IPA from the wonderful Overtone Brewing Company in Glasgow. So let's do this. Oh, the can was a wee bit hard there, so some of the beer got a little bit excited. So let's just get this guy out into the glass. Let's see what we have. Oh, interesting. This one is not one of the hazier ones we've seen from Overtone, actually. But it does contain oats and wheat, so yeah, maybe not the soupiest and gloopiest of New Englands that we've seen from this brewery. But anyway, before the head disappears from this one, we can see that it came out, we've got about 80% of the beer out and into the glass, but you can see that it poured with about a quarter to a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, white head there. If I bring that up to the glass, you can see there's some medium-sized bubbles on the surface a little bit. It does get a little bit foamier further up than that, but yeah, certainly not the foamiest of heads we've seen from an Overtone IPA before. But yeah, I get the feeling, I did notice on the can there, it doesn't say New England Hazy, it does say just simply double IPA, this one. So maybe this beer is going to be more of one of these beers that we could call like American IPA, which usually means kind of somewhere in the middle. So remember, the key differences between the New England IPAs and the West Coast, the New England ones have a bit of oat and wheat in the malt base as well as the barley malt. They tend to be lower in bitterness because they rely more on late addition and dry hopping. The West Coast IPAs use primarily barley malt. They usually have a deeper and danker green component as well, and then you've got some nice kind of fruity characteristics as well. So yeah, that's quite an interesting one. But yeah, just going by the appearance of this one, I think this is going to be somewhere in the middle. There's a lot of breweries that just call their beers American IPAs now, and that those are the ones that are kind of somewhere in the middle, if you like. So we'll see how we go with this beer. But appearance wise, as you can see, it's poured this lovely kind of bright yellow mango juice colour. Certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest of things we've seen from Overtone over the years. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, but or the surface of the liquid there. I don't think there's much head on this one, to be honest with you, but yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation. But yeah, it looks pretty nice, this one. You can see it is more of a natural haze that comes out of this one, so I do like how that pieces together. I don't think we really need to say much more about the appearance of this one, so let's have a wee look at the aroma and just see how we get on. So, oh, aroma wise, there's something quite familiar about this one. I think the yeast, I'd be curious to know what yeast they're using in this, because there's something just very familiar about it. It actually reminds me of a number of the Apex Brewing Company beers that I had from Sweden. I think it's the WLP 5 yeast, if I'm not mistaken, that they quite often use. But yeah, the aroma of this one is very, very familiar because of that yeasty character, that sort of woody, crackery, brown bready note that comes out of this one. Just that little touch of earthiness too. And this is an interesting thing, because you always get this note in the aroma, but it quite often doesn't come out in the flavour actually. But yeah, aroma wise, this beer is quite different to what we've had from Overtone in the past, for sure. I think this one's going to be a bit more of a kind of lighter, easy drinking sort of thing. But I think just from that aroma and from what I've smelled so far, definitely more American IPA rather than being straight out New England. So I've told you lies at the start of the video on this one. I do apologise for that. But yeah, everything you'd expect in here. A bit of breadiness. You've got a nice big green component to it as well, and some juicy fruity notes there. Leans a bit more toward the tropical side, which I think is fair to say. But let's break down this aroma and describe the beer a wee bit more in depth for you. Let's do that. So, the backbone of this beer, you have the backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust coming out of this one. That is the backbone of your beer. You do get little bits of woodiness in there as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of woodiness in this one, and yeah, a little bit of woodiness, a little bit of cracker and stuff like that. And yeah, it's woody, a little bit of cracker, wholemeal brown bread. And then, yeah, you do have some really nice, how do you say, you just have a little bit of, like, it's not quite a wholemeal brown bread, but just this really light, kind of fluffy-ish brown bready character sitting on top of it. It's not quite German sort of pumpernickel bread either. Yeah, I'm trying to think what that bready character is. It's almost just like woody. Yeah. So above the kind of crackery layer, there's this wee bit of like wholemeal brown bready, very light brown bread crust. But then above that, you've got this really fluffy, like plain loaf white bread. It actually really reminds me of the bread that my mum used to make my sandwiches with when I was going to school. But yeah, the white bready character is quite a bit sweeter than the brown bread for me. And then in the back of the nose, you're definitely getting a little bit of a kind of wheaty bitiness in there. You can smell that in the top of the nose, but there's also a more dense white bready, wheaty character comes out of this one too. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is really, really very nice. But yeah, bit of bitey, wheaty character in there at the back. You've got some nice sort of oaty, creamy notes coming out of this one too, but it's, as I say, the oats just give you that little bit of smoothness in the middle of the nose. So yeah, you can smell a wee bit of that sweet oaty character for sure. So yeah, lovely sweet oatiness. There's a little touch of like that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing to this one, but no, the sweetness in the middle of the nose with this one is quite, yeah, I'd say it's quite sort of, it's just like sweet creamy oats. It almost smells a little bit like some of the oat cream beers that we've had from these guys in a sense, but just obviously dialed way down, because this is not obviously a New England hazy by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, it's a sweet little bit of oaty character in the middle of the nose, and yeah, the way all of that pieces together, I think, is really quite nice. So yeah, wee touch of biscuity sweetness in there, a little bit of Werther's Original Butter Candy oaty notes, and that sits on top of the wheat. I think at that we've covered everything we need to say about the malty side of the beer. We've covered a bit about the yeast earlier on, so let's go on to the hoppy side of things. Now, when it comes to hopping IPAs, you have 3 different kinds of hoppings you can do. You've got early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness and a deep dank aroma. Late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil usually. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma, and gives you quite a bright green component actually. Then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, and that one gives you pretty much all flavour and aroma, and quite a bright green component as well, I would add. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the hopping. But with this beer, you can tell that from the aroma, it has got a little touch of deep dankness to it, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of early addition hop going on in here, but the green component is quite bright, so mainly it's a nice mainly it's quite a nice bright floral character that comes out of this one. So yeah, nice bright floral aromaticity for sure. Good little bit of zesty grassy character as well, I think, and yeah, a little bit of zesty grassy character as well, and I'm getting a little bit of the earthiness from the mosaic as well. I'll have to say that there's a wee touch of just earthiness in the back of the nose too. So I do like how that pieces together. The way everything goes together in this one, I think, is very nice. So gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. The fruity side of things is kind of what you'd expect from this beer as well, from these hops if you know them. So for me, there's quite a lot of, I do get quite a bit of soft passion fruit out of this one, but there's big juicy mangoes in there, a little bit of apricot of course as well. If we sugar it up, you have to this one's actually quite mild in terms of its aroma, you really need to sugar it up. So yeah, you've got that little bit of, I would say, there's a little bit of a more, yeah, they've got a wee bit of apricot and papaya in this one, which is most likely, I think Eldorado's going to give you a bit of that, but mostly it's going to come from Citra. But then yeah, you start to get the juicy tangerine notes out of the mosaic in this one as well. So yeah, I think the mosaic shows itself a little bit more the more that you smell of this one. But all in all, there's nothing overly surprising about the fruity side of the beer and the green component in this one. But like I say, compared to other overtones I've had in the past, this one really does strike me as being a bit more kind of in the middle. This is one that you could call like a generic American IPA rather than being New England Hazy or West Coast. And if memory serves me correctly, I think we've had about 40 overtone beers on the channel, something like that. This might well be the first one we've had that would fit into that kind of category, so that makes it quite interesting. I'm glad I picked this one up because it was the Marble Skies that I picked as my first one. I bought this one kind of more on impulse actually, but yeah, let's get the rest of this beer out into the glass then and see what we have. But as I always say, take a wee bit more time and you can see, there we go, all the stuff I've said about all the stuff I'd said with this one. I sugared the can up as well before we I sugared the can up as well before we did the video, and then that happens. There you go. Yeah, you can see now it definitely looks more like a New England Hazy actually. So let's just take another wee look at the aroma. Yeah, yeah, now it's definitely got a wee bit more of kind of oaty creamy note to it. But I think everything else I said about the aroma kind of holds fast on this one. That's just quite funny actually, that's typical. First time that's happened on the channel actually. But yeah, I sugared the thing up before we opened up the can as well. But yeah, certainly looks more like a kind of soupy gloopy New England double IPA. Now that's more in line with what we would expect of Overtone as well, but yeah. yeah, the yeasty character takes a bit of a back seat, and you get more of the kind of oatiness coming out of this one now. But everything else about, you know, the yeasty character is still there. The oatiness is a bit more creamy, and there's a wee bit more dryness in this one actually still, though. That's quite interesting. But yeah, as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. With a beer like this, if you have had it in the fridge for a week or two, as I have had with this one, you know, sugar it up before you pour the thing. So yeah, typical. But let's get stuck into this one. This is the Utopia, quite obviously now, yeah, New England Hazy Double IPA from the wonderful Overtone Brewing Company in Yoker in Glasgow, back in the motherland of Scotland. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that is interesting. Took quite a good gulp of that actually, but you can certainly tell that this one has a wee bit more of a, you can certainly tell that it has a wee bit more of a kind of like yeasty nature to it. It really does remind me of some of those Apex brewing beers that I had from Sweden. So yeah, that's quite impressive actually. It's a thumbs up for me though. This is another very, very solid beer from Overtone Brewing, which we would obviously expect from them in this particular style category. So yeah, this is good. Awesome stuff. So, other impression on this one is it's very juicy and very citrusy. Actually, it's got a little bit, you know, it's got a little bit of a tack to it, which is quite interesting. But yeah, in terms of it being a New England hazy, as I've often said, there are 6 different elements to think about with the flavour of these beers. You've got the kind of farmhousey, yeasty character, the rye and grainy side of things. Those are a bit more common in American brewed New Englands, but you've got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things. For me, this beer's got a bit more yeastiness to it. There is quite a bit of wheaty attack in it, but there is a fair little bit of oaty creaminess and a little bit of, you know, the barley malt's quite obvious in this one as well. It's mainly just the rye side of things, the graininess that's missing from this one a wee bit, although in fairness you do get a little bit of that into the aftertaste. But all in all, like I say, another very solid beer. Let's break it down and just describe that flavour for you more in depth. Middle third of your palate then, the backbone of the beer is this lovely kind of slightly dry brown bready bread crust. I think it's more brown bread in this case. As you move further forward on that middle third of the palate, there's a wee bit of woodiness in there. So yeah, a little touch of woodiness. Some Jacob's cream cracker above that. So yeah, the brown bready hedgehog sort of roll. Wee bit of Jacob's cream cracker in there as well, and some woodiness. But then yeah, you start to get the bready notes out of this beer. So for me, there is a bit of a layer of brown bread in there, but it doesn't come across as being overly prominent in the flavour, I would say, until you get to the aftertaste. But then yeah, you've got the white bready layer from the barley malt in there, which actually feels quite fluffy and airy and quite sweet. So yeah, the way that that goes together is quite nice too. So yeah, a little bit of a more wheaty character sitting above that too. Above the white bread, you can feel that more dense, wheaty white bready layer coming out of this one. See more of a dense, wheaty white bready layer in there, and at the back of that middle third of your palate, you certainly get a wee bit of the wheaty bitiness, but the wheat just kind of mellows out a little bit, and you can feel it acting more as a smoothing agent as you reach the front of that middle third of your palate. But above all of that, you have a really nice, as I say, you start to get the oatiness out of this beer, and down the middle line of your palate, it has this really nice kind of creamy oaty character coming out of the beer. So yeah, the big creamy oatiness that's coming out of this one is great. And as you move further out toward the edges of the edges of the palate there, you can feel the oatiness just gets a little bit drier. As I've often said, with New England IPAs, the oaty creaminess can be a good crude measure of how fresh your New England IPA is. Essentially, the creamier the oaty character is, the fresher your beer is, the drier the oats are, the older it is. This one's still in pretty good condition. When I got these beers, I think they'd been canned maybe about a month before. I reviewed the other one about a week or so ago now, and then this one's a little bit older, but yeah, both of them have been in pretty good condition, actually, the Overtone ones, the Marble Skies being the last one, of course. In the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little touch of that Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing, and you can feel some kind of biscuity notes just emanating from that as you spread, as you go further out toward the sides of your palate. But all in all, a really, really nice beer, this one, actually. So yeah, on the I think on the middle third of the palate, I think we've covered everything we need to say there. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. You get the brown bread, a little bit of brown bread in the base and the white bread on top, and a wee bit of the wheaty bitiness there. But remember, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back, and generally speaking, the back third of your palate will give you similar malty flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. But yeah, the back of that, the base of that back third of your palate, you've got some nice kind of brown bready bread crust in there. Above that, you have a bit of the Jacob's cream cracker, which feels a bit drier. You've got the brown bready layer in there, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. So yeah, you've got a little bit of that lighter, more airy sort of thing in there. And then above all of that, you have, yeah, you've got a little bit of the white bready character there, which again feels a little bit lighter, more airy, but still a bit drier. You can feel the wheaty character just kind of creeping over the top of that. And yeah, the way that all of that pieces together, I think, is really quite nice. So yeah, a little bit of wheaty bitiness in there, and yeah, like I say, I quite like how all of that pieces together. Yeah, on top of that, there is on top of that, you have the yeasty character coming out of the beer, so I think that's quite nice as well. So let's focus on that yeasty note, because the yeasty note does linger there into the aftertaste. I'm pretty sure this has got to be the WLP 66, something like that. This is the same yeast that Apex in Sweden like to use. You can just tell from the flavour of it. So yeah, the yeasty side of the beer, you've got this dense, slightly sweet brown bread in the middle, and as you move further out from that, it becomes more like a white bread with a wee bit of cracker and wood and stuff through it, and then around the edge you've got more of that kind of woody nature coming out of the beer too. So yeah, you've got a little bit of a more bread crusty woody character just on the edge of the palate with this one, or just on the edge of the yeasty side of the beer. But yeah, the yeastiness there, the woodiness and crackery nature of this one just lingers into the aftertaste. So yeah, certainly you can feel the flavour of this beer. You can feel it is taller on the back third of your palate, then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way all of that pieces together, I think, is really quite nice. Yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. The green component in this one is actually quite nice, and it's quite smooth as well, which is what you're going to get, because there's El Dorado Cryo in this one. Whenever you use the Cryo hops, which is basically like a kind of concentrated part of the hop, it's like basically oil derived from the good part of the hop that gives you the flavour, essentially. It always smoothens out the green component, but certainly in the back corners of the palate you do get a little touch of earthiness in there. That's going to come from the mosaic. As you move further forward, it's got a little bit of herbal character as well. Then as you push further forward from that, you get a wee bit more floral aromaticity, and round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is just that little bit more grassy, and the beer is that little bit more grassy and zesty, if you like, but still the whole green component is very, very smooth in this one. But yeah, let's focus on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things. So yeah, for me, in that border region, you've still got the bready notes in there, so brown bread in the base, white bread on top, and the wheaty note just sitting above that. But then yeah, the base of this beer, yeah, the base of the beer, you've got this really nice kind of white bready bread crust in there. On top of that, you've got a bit of Jacob's cream cracker, some wholemeal brown bread above that white bread, and then the denser wheaty note, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah. So yeah, the the fruity side of this beer is actually really quite nice. At the very back of that front third of your palate, there is a little bit of that peachy, that sharper peachy note in there, which is going to come from the Citra. But yeah, as you move further forward from that, big juicy mangoes, again that Citra. El Dorado will give you a little bit of that. Then you start to get the, in the middle of the front third of your palate, you get the sort of apricot, pineapple, a little bit of papaya, and yeah, El Dorado is going to give you a wee bit of that too. You get a bit of a softer passion fruit the further into the aftertaste that you go as well. But then yeah, as you move further forward into the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's got a little bit more of a, yeah, it's certainly got a little bit more of a kind of orangey tangerine note, which will be the Mosaic, of course. So yeah, tangerine orangey note in this one comes out a wee bit later on, but yeah, again, I really like how everything just pieces together in this beer, and I think it's very nicely done. So yeah, it's a big thumbs up from me. So on the I think in terms of the flavour, that's maybe everything we really need to say about this one. The only other thing I'd say is that behind the very front tip of the tongue, there's a very slight limey note mixing in with the grassy esters. But yeah, all in all, interesting beer, this one, and it gives you more of that yeasty character into the aftertaste, like I said. But it's just, I'm still laughing at the way that when we poured this one, that we didn't really get any sediment or whatever from it. So, well, we got so much sediment, that's what I mean. Come on, brain, wake up. But yeah, let's round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise for me, mid-bodied beer, right in the middle of the spectrum. Carbonation is very smooth, has a little bit of that cleanliness to it as well. I think in terms of IBUs, it could be 30 or 40 IBUs, it's a little bit hard to tell. In the back corners of the palate you get a wee bit more bitterness, but further forward it's certainly got a little bit more smoothness to it. So I'd be tempted to say 30, at a push 40 IBUs with this one. The malt base has a little bit of dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, and a bit of a kind of thicker bready character and sweetness on top. Then you get all those lovely juicy fruity notes out of this one. I think it's more tropical in the beginning, but then as you progress further into the aftertaste, you get a wee bit more of that kind of citrusy tangerine note out of this one. But all in all, another really solid beer from Overtone Brewing, and I wouldn't expect any less. As I say, still laughing at myself for messing up the pour with this one and getting all that sediment later on. But yeah, still hasn't changed my enjoyment of the beer. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the review anyway. But let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Overtone Brewing Company as well, and we will return to these guys again in the very near future. But until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next one. Ciao just now.